Good morning, man. I'm great. How are you? Are we good to start?
Good. Yeah, I see Bob Isaacson from CREC, so that's good.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think we're ready to roll. Let's
All
go for
right.
it.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a fantastic weekend and great to hear that some people are getting summer weather, thunderstorm weather. Hope the summer weather becomes more consistent. As Matt said, it looks like we're going to have some great content covered today by Bob Isaacson. And so, as always, if you can please put your name and affiliation in the chat, and we will go ahead and get started. So, with that, I'll pass it to our executive director, Matt Bogosian. The floor is
Gr-
yours.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Michelle, of course, is from the Century Foundation, one of our original founding partners. And thank you so much for the good hard work you and your folks do on workforce and DEI. It takes a village, that's for sure. And so we're lucky to have that association and the association with all of the folks here, trying to strengthen the American project. For those new to the call, right, this is the 30-minute every week AMCC national call where regional leaders from all kinds of perches and BFFs, best friends from forever, from federal agencies and nonprofit organizations, are working together toward greater collective impact to get to sustainable development, prioritizing transportation, agriculture, communications, IT, and health, looking at kind of the bottom-up approach, which is proliferating. And in addition to these Monday calls, of course, we send out a weekly AMCC update. And thanks to David Van Sicklen, our operations director, for doing a lot of laboring work, working with me to put that out every week. And as we do on this call, sometimes it's a round robin call, like we've had recently, talking about the Tech Hub program and other challenges and opportunities. Other days, other weeks, I should say, on Mondays, we have presentations from BFFs, and this is one of those presentation days. So before I introduce our speaker on for today's presentation, I want to just highlight a couple of big things from the AMCC update. Of course, the Tech Hub competition was just announced. It's a two-phase approach to using the first tranche of the $10 billion Tech Hub program that was signed into law, the authorization last August by President Biden, and $500 million was appropriated at the same time. So the Economic Development Administration has been shaping that into a open opportunity. So in the AMCC update, and David, you might want to drop into the chat there the notice of funding opportunity. So it's a three-month window for regions to self-organize, and it's a two-step. The first 3-month deadline is for these strategy development grants. And as you could see from the AMCC update, and we'll read in more detail, the idea is to distribute $15 million to get these strategy development grants. And then phase two, from the folks involved in phase one, they want to use a big chunk of that $500 million to distribute for implementation awards. So we're all studying it. a lot more to come and discuss. We've been talking about it for a long time, but finding out what the details are, who can apply, and we'll be talking on more Mondays about that as we go forward. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to also highlight a report that just came out. We talk about the big 6 elements of a thriving manufacturing ecosystem. And one of those, of course, is operational improvement and capital access. And so our BFF, Ron Kelly from the Department of Treasury, who is often on this call. The White House just released a report about good news in manufacturing, and David, you could drop that into the chat. A lot of folks working together to strengthen American manufacturing. So there's some good trends, and there's some good tactics out there to get more capital access for innovation improvements in the manufacturing sector. So that's some good stuff, but I don't want to take any more time. Let me, happy to have Bob Isaacson from the Center for Regional Economic to talk about one of their good program, our BFFs in state agencies and et cetera. So Bob, why don't I just turn it to you, and thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you, Matt. I hope my slides are appearing on everyone's screen at this point. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with your network and share some of the work that we're doing. I wanted to mention in regards to the work that you've just mentioned with Treasury and the White House report, CREC played a big role with the development of that report, and many of the folks on this call were big players in that as well. We talked to probably a dozen different states and asking them what they were doing with SSBCI funds to support and grow and facilitate manufacturing growth. So I thank you for everybody's participation and contribution to that effort as well. I'm Bob Isaacson, Senior Vice President with the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness. I'm going to talk a little bit about a project we're involved in, which many of you have probably heard about over the last several years. Seems like several years sometimes, given all the activity we've been doing. It's been about 2 years now we've been working on this, really trying to promote economic development and alignment within state and economic development districts. Now, the project was funded by EDA for CREC and partners to promote alignment, as I mentioned, across economic development regions. And the question always is, why are we doing this? Well, what we're finding is oftentimes strategies and investments are not well coordinated, and they're not very well aligned. And sometimes states are operating independently of EDA initiatives or economic development districts, including those identified in some of the regional comprehensive economic development strategies. And that results sometimes in inconsistent goals and strategies, which can be minimizing the effectiveness and overall, and sometimes providing some disadvantage elements or tactics in trying to get some things done. So we're trying to, through applied research and education and technical assistance, we're hoping that state and local leaders will coordinate investments better, align their efforts to grow industry clusters like manufacturing, and leverage common tools. And we're fortunate enough to have several national networks to help us reach our key stakeholders and facilitate the alignment between states and economic development districts. We've been working with NADO throughout the effort, State Economic Development Executives Network, or the SEED network. MAT and AMCC have been vital to the work we've been doing in this space. And of course, the state international trade leaders have been a big part of this as well. There's three big buckets of the work that we're doing here. We're trying to improve collaboration where it's occurring by helping states and regions design and leverage common recovery and resiliency plans through research, trying to understand better what's actually happening. So a big element of that is mapping the economic development strategies against the SEDS plan. So we're looking at what states are doing in terms of strategic plans and what the economic development districts, the economic development SEDS plans, if you will, comprehensive economic development strategies. And we developed a database to help us map those things out. And I'll provide a little bit more information about that database in a moment. But we're really trying to identify areas of collaboration and alignment between those state and local areas. And also did a lot of work trying to add research and content to USA Competes website, which is a great website for states and local economic developers to better understand how they can help businesses with their overall export plans, especially in the manufacturing space. And thirdly, we're doing a lot of more work right now with investigating how these $1 million statewide planning grants have actually resulted in activity throughout the 50 states and the 9 territories and other areas that receive these $1 million. So if you've heard some scuttlebutt or some discussion about a survey going out and interviews occurring with CREC and states and territories and other areas on this topic, that's really what that's connected to. We're really trying to understand better how states are using that $1 million planning grant and how we can help improve that overall activity, whether they're dealing with industry clusters, supply chains, or any other type of activity that they're engaged in. We're also, in terms of the education area, delivering lots of webinars on topics targeted at economic development leaders. Matt's done several within the AMCC space, trying to help cybersecurity and other manufacturing topics. CITO's done several webinars related to international trade, and NADO's done some terrific work as well with local economic developers. We're delivering lots of educational content to key constituencies throughout the economic development ecosystem. Developing a guidebook that helps highlight some of the best practices. Manufacturing is one of those 7 elements or 7 issue areas that we've addressed in that guidebook, which will be published probably in the next couple of weeks here. And we've also put together a virtual curriculum with state economic development leaders, which is a video curriculum each leader sharing their thoughts on how to improve overall state economic development leadership in such areas as manufacturing programs, strategic planning, or development work with the state economic development or the local economic development leaders.
Hey, Bob.
And finally,
hey,
yeah,
would you mind resharing your slides? I'm not sure they're advancing on our view here.
sure. Okay, thank you, David. We'll try again here. How's that, David?
Great. We're seeing slide 5.
Yep, perfect. And the last item here after research and education is really, with those two being the foundation of our work, is technical assistance. And we're delivering on-site and virtual technical assistance efforts through workshops, one-on-one sessions, and also the Policy Academy effort that I'm going to speak to specifically today. We're conducting hands-on technical assistance engagement with 6 states. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. And I'm going to stay away from the actual slide presentation because that seemed to be the hiccup here. So I'll just stay with the virtual here. The Policy Academy is a collective or collaborative learning environment with facilitation. So we have 6 teams made up of state elements, state leaders, economic development district, which could be council of governments, regional planning councils, a variety of different economic development districts, and other groups, including folks from Manufacturing Extension Partnership, UEDA, colleges, a variety of different folks engaged in that team within each state team. And this is a 9-month initiative designed to help each team improve their alignment, provide some sustainable cultural changes, and really try to share some overall approaches and successes. We're really trying to help each team review their state-local relationship, educate these stakeholders and their stakeholders on the value of strategic alignment, and then, of course, receive some technical assistance as well. Now, the end game of the Policy Academy is really trying to identify regional collaborative initiatives that leverage state economic development funding and boost state outcomes at the regional and state level, generate collaboration models and policy innovations that can be replicated across the economic development ecosystem. So we don't want to limit it just to their individual relationships, but really replicate it across the state and region and nationally as well. We want to develop a higher sustained level of working relationship, really provide some cultural change, sustainable cultural change. So it isn't limited to just one little tactic or one little outcome, but we really want a cultural change to enable this alignment to occur throughout the ecosystem. We want to connect state and regional funding for EDA priorities, which include manufacturing, infrastructure, DEI elements, a variety of elements associated with EDA tactics and some of their priorities. Share an understanding of the policy changes between states and EDDs. Sometimes it's so easy for the states or EDDs just to focus on their own little limited perspective. And we want them really to engage each other to understand their overall limitations of their perspective and then how to grow that perspective so they can work together better. And develop an ongoing partnership and relationship that recognizes how EDA and the EDDs can be resources for state policy and priorities and potentially assist with implementation. The last item here is so critically important here. We don't want, just like we don't want the the priorities to be limited to one tactic. We don't want to be limited geographically. I mentioned this a little bit in an earlier point, but this should be something from the 6 states that we can share with other regions and other states throughout the country, so we can engage each other and improve what we're doing. So we have 6 teams that were selected through an RFP process. The team priorities, some of them have all of them, some of them have a couple of these, but it's really kind of a good illustration of what they're thinking in terms of what they'll be successful in. They want to have looking at retirements, how they're going to create new systems with their new partners, improving their state and local regional competitiveness, especially in manufacturing, improved alignment, of course, between state and regional plans, and improve the planning outcomes so they can improve some of that output as they look to actually implement some and execute some of their planning. And to a person, they're really interested in rural prosperity as well. They recognize some of the disparities they're seeing in their state, and they want to make sure that the growth is being seen across the state. Now, if we back up just a little bit, the Policy Academy timetable, we had a kickoff meeting last month. We had all 6 teams come into Arlington, Virginia, where CREC is headquartered, and we had all the teams gather to discuss the projects and work plans. It was a terrific 1.5-day session, and everyone left exhausted, but very energized and enthusiastic about how they can kind of move ahead and develop a work plan to engage each other in cultural change and how they can improve the alignment. During the summer and fall, there'd be periodic calls with our facilitator that'll be working with each team. There'll be lots of academy calls between teams to discuss what they're doing and how they're learning so they can learn from each other. We'll get together again this fall. All the team leaders will come together to discuss their progress and strategies so they can learn from each other. And we'll have a wrap-up meeting in January, really hopefully to share some of the big elements of success and how we can transcend their overall work plans to a greater sustainable change culturally, not only within their organizations, but also, again, regionally and nationally. That's what I wanted to highlight today, is just this Policy Academy and what we're trying to do to engage these states, these 6 states and their local economic development district partners, along with the other stakeholders, MEP, UEDIA, and some other organizations, and really trying to engage this. And what I wanted to do is raise the awareness of this, because this isn't something, again, is limited to these 6 state teams, but it's going to be shared with all of you, and you can engage this and use it to your benefit, and hopefully we'll be able to create a national awareness and consciousness about how to improve alignment in so many areas, not just manufacturing, of course, that's going to be a big part of this, but throughout the overall ecosystem of economic development. I wanted to mention the website to learn more about this effort, not just the Policy Academy, but also the overall alignment project at stateeconomicdevelopment.org. Again, stateeconomicdevelopment.org. That provides all the information you could hope to understand, has all the blogs and all the other work that we've been doing in this effort. So I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the alignment project and the Policy Academy. It's very exciting, a lot of enthusiasm to spend, which we'll need to spend together for 9 months, really trying to engage that cultural change throughout the nation.
Bob, that's great. This is Matt. Can you speak to states that may not be participating in this? Like, what's their on-ramp to get their states more engaged in kind of best practices around sustainable economic development? What would you say to them?
A couple of things. I think some tools on the website will be helpful for them that are on there right now in terms of some of the blogs and other white papers that describe some of the work that we've done in partnership with AMCC, NADO, and others. In particular, the best practices work that will be out in the next couple of weeks that will share what actually has been successful for states and economic development districts in working together in 7 key areas. And that will, I think, provides a real good foundation and guidebook on how you can work together to achieve some of that cultural change and improve the overall alignment to improve economic outcomes. And this Policy Academy work, I don't mean to overemphasize this, but boy, the 6 teams are certainly a focus initially, but we really want to engage this nationally. So we're going to be publishing lots of items that we've learned and other tactics that we're learning from this Policy Academy and share that nationally on that website so folks can learn a little bit more about how they can engage states or how can states can engage some economic development districts to move their collective strategies together further along and achieve higher and better economic outcomes.
Yeah, this is super important work, Bob. And, you know, it's getting more complex, you know, with the fact that we have, you know, this good news of these multiple federal interventions into, you know, economic development. And so and I know, you know, part of the work includes, you know, how you weave those interventions together. You know, that's just, you know, we have on this call, you know, interventions from DOD, you know, our BFF, Hugh Watts on here, and Alex from DOE, you know, then we've got the NSF engines and of course, all of the EDA interventions. That's got to be a piece of the best practices, right? You know, how do you, and then, you know, some states, we have California, you know, on the call right here, Jennifer Lovett from California Forward. There's a bunch of, in that state, state interventions. And so that weaving process is a emerging set of best practices that no doubt you're looking at with those 6 states. But can you speak to that? Like, you know, where are we and where do you see us heading in terms of, you know, best practices there?
Yeah, great examples, man. I think one of the things to keep in mind, and we're all aware of this, is the fragmented nature of the work we're up to and the work we're doing. And these Monday calls are a great way to begin breaking down some of that fragmented nature and collectively come together to identify how we can work together. It starts small. It starts individually within your local areas, how you can work together with some of your local stakeholders, and then kind of builds up from there into some of the larger regional and state leadership strategies as well. So it's so important to develop some successes so you gain some confidence and collaborative esprit de corps, and then move ahead. And once you start to see those successes, you can start to have that game plan and convince people how working together can be so effective and efficient in improving their overall economic outcomes. I think sometimes people don't recognize that there are different groups out there that can collectively make their job easier. It can make their economic outcomes better and higher level, and overall improve what we are all here to do, improve our collective economic prosperity for all Americans. And that's really starts at the grassroots level, which I think all of us practice at, and then building up from there. So it's a matter of seeing those tiny successes and then building it up and having that track record to positively show how we can move together collectively in a collaborative way to have that alignment and ultimately ensuring better performance.
That's great. So questions for Bob. We have a few minutes left. Anyone want to raise your hand or drop something in the chat? Leif, I saw you dropped the links that Bob was talking about in the chat, so that's good. Questions for Bob? Go ahead.
Let me just add something about I mentioned the $1 million state planning grant just in passing. It's a key part of the project. It's kind of a secondary to the Policy Academy for this presentation, but that's really a really important initiative that we're doing with EDA right now, trying to better understand what states are doing with those $1 million planning grants that were awarded through ARPA. It's really exciting because there's lots of consistency of what states are doing, and we're really trying to understand better how states can learn from each other with the state planning grant, how they've worked with economic development districts to execute and plan for those $1 million planning grants. And Leif Olson is the actual project manager for that effort. So if you have some questions about that specific element of the work that I've been speaking of here, talk to Leif, and Leif, maybe you can drop your email in that box, the chat box as well. We're really excited about that effort, really trying to learn, a great laboratory to learn from each other on how states are going forward with some of these new experimental dollars.
I have a question. So how this seems like a similar mission to the National Association of Development Organizations, NADO, who just received an EDA grant on the community collaboration like AMCC.
Right.
is your grant that grant also? I'm confused between the two initiatives here.
NADO has a communities of practice where they're coming together with folks who are doing similar tactics in a particular area. We're looking at an overall ecosystem of alignment over all strategies. So it's a much broader perspective between these 6 states rather. So NADO has a more specific tactic or task, if you will. We're focused on alignment across the entire ecosystem and really focus on these 6 states with a variety of different issues and interests that are not necessarily in the realm of communities of practice, because each state has a very different approach and a very different application and a very different idea of what they want to accomplish. So it's similar in that we're working together, but different in terms of each state has a different tactic, a different focus area, and not so much in terms of a specific community of practice per se.
And to Linda, that's a good question. You know, there is a lot of, the good news, back to the good news, we have a lot of investments, but they're coming out and there's a lot to them. One of those is through ARPA, a set of 8 communities of practice the EDA has set up. NADO, National Association of Development Organizations, is honchoing the one for economic development districts, and there are others, and we're with the leadership of Nancy Gilbert and Tori Brown, having regular meetings with the various communities of practice so that we're more coordinated and can communicate more effectively with stakeholders like you about all of the different interventions. So that's a challenge. It's good to have the challenge, but a challenge nonetheless. So we have go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, one key element to think about this is we have this overarching alignment effort. So within the community practices, everyone's trying to do their job better within a particular grant area. Our job, what we're trying to do with EDA and our partners, is improve the alignment between state and economic development districts in whatever area they're focused on. So if NADO is looking at economic development districts and how they're managing some things, we want the economic development districts to be working with the states as well. So there's kind of a broader alignment and connection within the ecosystem that engages all the community practices. We, like Matt, we have connections with all the community practices in the course of this work as well. So we're trying to build all these community practices together so they can all work together in an alignment ecosystem.
Great. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. Nancy Gilbert dropped a question in the chat. If you all are seeing that, she's wondering how many of the participants on this call may be engaged in their state's $1 million ARPA statewide planning grant. Nancy, can you drop your email in the chat, and then people could grab that and respond directly, because I don't think we're going to have time to dive into that. Thanks, Nancy.
And CC Leif on those emails, if you could, please. That'd be great as well.
Awesome. Well, let me turn it back to you, Michelle, and we can close out the meeting.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt and Bob. Thank you for that great presentation, and thanks a lot. It was a lot of great content, and excited to keep this conversation going. Everyone, we're wishing you a wonderful week, and we hope to see you the same time next week on Monday. And we hope to be in touch. Take care, and thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.